Hey there, Internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. Joining me this week, we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's up, nerds? Time to crack open a cold
Is
one.
up. There you go. Crack it open. I got myself a cider on my end to an Angry Orchard to kind of wind down the day. And today's episode is going to be pretty much talking all about Final Fantasy VII Remake. Spoiler free. Neither of us have beaten the game yet, but that's going to be kind of the topic of the show, really. We might, delve into a little bit of the other things we're playing, but it's pretty much going to be, let's go through all of the cool things about Final Fantasy VII. So if you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast everywhere you can. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can always support us over on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. We don't have any new patrons, but if you do, we will shout you out in this segment of an episode. So thank you to Frank and Jazz for holding down the fort last week, kind of doing an episode with the two of them. Well, I wanted to kind of relax a little bit, beat Doom Eternal finally, and yeah. So yeah, let's just dive right on in, Cameron, to Final Fantasy VII Remake. First, I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit our history with Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy VII in particular. So I will kind of throw to you first there. I know you and I have had many a conversation about Final Fantasy, but specifically Final Fantasy VII, where are you at?
Final Fantasy VII is honestly, I think everybody says they have like that game that made them realize, like that game from your adolescence that made you kind of like, it clicked like, oh, video games can tell like this kind of story. I know famously like Metal Gear Solid is one for a lot of people.
Yep.
This is just kind of that era of where, like, we're talking Final Fantasy VII, that came out in 1997, 1998 era of kind of trending from it being, like, the standard release to, I don't know anybody who didn't have, like, the greatest hits copy of that game. Mm-hmm. That was an amazing, just, like, $20 deal, like, just a steal for $20.
Yeah.
But like I talked about this on, I was recently on a RPG University episode, like mega episode with like nine other panelists.
Yeah, I haven't listened to the episode, but I caught the little teaser intro thing that they did for it, where you guys are all like acting out the final scene. And I was like, nice, because it didn't like when I had heard that you guys had done a 9-person thing, it didn't dawn on me of like, oh, there are 9 party members in the original Final Fantasy VII. So that makes sense, I guess. And I don't know if that was what Scott was going for, but when I saw kind of you guys acting stuff out put to the gameplay there on Twitter, I was like, oh, okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. I will say, like, so like I got to the dock like way later than other people did, so like most people had kind of selected their roles. And so it was like, cool, so I can be either Yuffie or Sid. And I'm like, huh. Like, I could do a high-pitched voice. I can do a lady, like a teenage girl voice if I need to. It would be terrible, and nobody will enjoy it. Or
on the Final Fantasy VI episode I sang the opera scene. So
that's fair.
You would not be alone there.
Yeah. But instead, I think Alex was the one that ended up having to do it. Alex O'Neill from Irrational Passions. But I was Sid, and I was like, huh. Does it say a lot about me that I also picked the person who, without a doubt, has like the most lines?
In that sequence. My favorite was hearing Jarrett as Kate Sith or Kitschy or however you say its name. I always said Kate Sith because that's what it looked like growing up.
Yeah, that's how it's spelled. It's big because Kate Sith or Kitsy or whatever it is. It's because it's Gaelic, so it had like it's spelt like regular English, but it is not pronounced like regular English, so it's weird.
It's like Saoirse Ronan. But yeah, like hearing Jared pop up for that one line, I was like, nice.
Just being Jared.
Yep. Yeah, that was a cool thing you got to do. So Final Fantasy VII, very fresh on your mind from that.
Oh, for sure. Just like, man, this game is I had to have been 8 or 9 when like I finally owned it. But before then, it was like the game that like the great thing about the PlayStation was not only were games portable, but you could also take your memory card with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it'd be like, cool, it's Saturday or it's the summer, like, okay, today we're going to keep watching somebody play through Final Fantasy VII. Whose house are we going to? Like, whose house can we go to that, like, we won't be annoying the parents if we stay in somebody's room all day?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, we would bounce around to each other's houses and just slot in the memory card and just get started. And whose ever, like, house it was the person who got to, like, play for the most part. Of course, we, like, handed it off. But there was always, like, that contention of, like, okay, well, who did you name who?
I was gonna say, yeah, because that was the era when we could name all the characters, and so did you guys, like, in your group of friends, name, like, characters after yourselves?
100%.
Okay, so who did you get pegged as of these 9?
So I got shifted between either Vincent or Sid.
Okay.
Originally
Very respectable characters.
Yeah, very respectable characters. On one person's playthrough, I was Kate Sith. Once again, like, respectable character, like great. Like, honestly, I don't think there's such a bad thing as a bad, like, main party member in 7. I think the dynamic of materia being, like, the casting and ability stuff let you kind of pick and choose who you preferred based off of more surface level kind of level aesthetic choices.
Yeah.
Like, my main party, because of just power and just, like, base attack power as well as magical ability, I balanced my party out with Sid, Vincent, and Cloud.
Okay.
And so, like, but I know other people would keep Barrett or Tifa in. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that was always really cool that people could really associate, like, what their party they wanted to have in there was. I will say that, so, like, this game actually was a bit of, like, a coming-of-age moment for me when I was a kid.
Okay.
Because the Superstition Springs Outlet Mall, are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Like, the coat factory outlet out there?
Okay.
There was an, like, mini, like, tiny, like, EB Games shop in that, like, mall. And they had Final Fantasy VII. And Final Fantasy, like, even though the game was just hard to find at this point, and so it was just a matter of, like, finding a store that had it. Like, you could go to Funko Land, but Funko Land was also, like, Funko Land used to, like, rent out their systems, and so, like, they would also, like, rent out the games, and so you weren't always able to find it because sometimes it was rented out. Somebody had long stolen it from Blockbuster Video.
Yeah. I want to say this is probably still from the era where I would go to, like, we would go to Toys R Us and pick up, like, the slip and then go hand it in to, like, the
yes.
people to redeem the game that we had purchased.
They never had the Toys R Us by me. They never had Final Fantasy VII because by then 8 had come out, and so they had Final Fantasy 8 out there. And so, like, but I was like, I loved this game. I ended up convincing my mom, okay, hey, can I get it? And my mom looked at it and she said, what does the T on the corner mean? And they're like, oh, that's the rating. And so, for context, I grew up in a house where, so I come, like, my family is extremely religious. Like, there was a morning Sunday meeting at my parents' home to celebrate Easter today, because we are recording this on Easter. Like, that happened. Like, my family is very, very, I don't want to say, like, conservative Christian, because that has a different connotation now than it did back in the 90s. But, like, that era of, like, we don't, like, a great example, we didn't watch PG-13 or rated R movies. We only watched G and PG movies. That's it.
Yeah.
The film that broke it, Pirates of the Caribbean. And to quote my father, this film is not a floodgate. This will not be opened, and all of a sudden we're all going to start watching PG-13 movies. And that's exactly what that film was. In a similar vein, I would say that this is a game that... So when my mom asked, what is that? It's T. And they're like, oh, it's T for teen. It's like a PG-13 movie. My mom's like, what? And she's like, well, what's the problem with it? And they're like, well, there's some, like, violence in there. And my mom's like, is it, like, gory? And they're like, no, like, it's pixelated and it's, like, on RPG, so they don't really show that sort of stuff. And she's like, okay, well, what else is there? And they turn around and they go, strong language. And she goes, define strong language. And, like, locked eyes with me. and I was like, oh, it says like the D word and the H word and because
But the really bad ones are all just a bunch of symbols.
I didn't tell her that because that would have been worse.
Ah, okay. You just
the
have to use your imagination.
No, the retailer told her that.
Oh, great.
Because I was like, and she goes, oh, well, that's not bad. And they go, yeah, like the good thing is like the really bad words are all like hashed out like in like symbols and stuff. And she goes, wait, what? And he goes, yeah, you can kind of tell which words they are because you can count the symbols and that tells you what word it is. And I was like, yeah, you're not getting this. You are not getting this. Like, this is like...
Way to go, EB Games.
Yeah, way to go, like, retailer who, like, if looking back, I think he's in his 20s, but he must have been in his teens. I was just a kid. Like some teenage Dorcas behind a EB game. It wasn't even like a full EB Games. It was like an EB Games outlet thing where they had like they sold the EB Games products. Like the stock was from EB Games, but then it was just a regular toy store otherwise. It was weird. Outlet malls are weird, man, especially in the 90s.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole thing was my mom was just like no, and then like a year later not even for my birthday, just like randomly, it's like we went. Oh no, it wasn't even a full year later. It was because this was during the summer. My birthday came around in November, and we went in to go get me some new shoes, and so we went and got new shoes. And on the way out, my mom said, "Oh, we got to stop in here real quick," and she bought the game for me. Nice. She's like, you are you are officially like 1 year older, and I expect you to be responsible and not imitate the words that you're seeing on here. And I'm like, thanks, Mom. Did my dad know about it? No. Nice. My dad would not have allowed. My mom and my dad. It was my mom's day to make. My parents have a weird relationship. I think I've talked about it before. They just trust each other a lot, like ridiculously a lot, like other couples do. But like it was my mom's day to decide big decisions, and she decided to do that because I didn't give her any hassle about getting new shoes, which I normally did.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, it was a good time. Like, and then I got the game, and then I poured over 100+ hours into a single run, and beat the game with that. I think I beat the game at 130 hours.
That's far more than you really need for that game.
Oh, 100%. Like I was level 65 before I left the continent, like the first continent.
Jeez. Okay. Yeah, that'll do it.
To be fair, that was not my first run through the game. That was just like the overall beginning to end completion one that I did where I didn't get like stuck being under-leveled in some place.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I talked about it on most recently on that Ultimate Video Game List Show Season 2 because our friend Brandon Gann had selected Final Fantasy VII. It was his like first round pick for the list for Season 2. And so I talked a little bit about my kind of history with the game on that, but kind of the abbreviated version is it was the first PlayStation game I ever played before I ever had a PlayStation. I would play it at friends' house, like you kind of talked about, even at my youth pastor when my family would take us to church on Sundays and stuff.
Shout out to youth pastors.
Yeah, the youth pastor, who's a guy probably in his like early 30s or something like that. He had the game, and we went over on like a Sunday afternoon, and like kids were out playing in the pool and stuff, but he had Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation, and I was like, I'm gonna play this. And it was like I have very distinct memories of playing basically in the open world section outside the Gold Saucer, just like fighting Joker, Jester kind of enemies and stuff like that. Playing on his system, and then my best friend growing up had a PlayStation before I did, so I would go. It was not uncommon that every couple months my parents would basically like take me over to his place and just leave me there for the weekend, and I would just stay with his family for the weekend. We'd have sleepovers and stuff, and we would just play that game constantly. And then finally, when my folks got a used PlayStation 1, my dad worked at a swap meet, basically brought home one day PlayStation with a whole bunch of random games, Final Fantasy VII among them, and then and like a memory card, and I just was off to the races. And I remember like back when I was playing with other friends and stuff, like at my friend Vinny's house or at the youth pastor's house, I remember having Final Fantasy VI having been that like wake up moment for me of this is like video games can tell these kinds of stories, these kind of grand crazy stories with lots of great characters and stuff. I remember at the time it was Final Fantasy 3, and so when like Final Fantasy 7 rolls around, I'm like, I missed 3 of these games. These are like my favorite games ever. How did I miss 3 of them? Because it wasn't until after the fact that like I got onto the internet and found out that they had been numbered differently in the States compared to in Japan. So yeah, I was like, it was blowing my mind that I was jumping from Final Fantasy 3 to Final Fantasy 7. But yeah, I love Final Fantasy 7. It's not my favorite of the Final Fantasies, as I've touched on. Final Fantasy, my ranking of the top 5, I guess, would be 6, 4, 9, 7, and then 10. Are my favorites of the core series. And I that said, I've probably played Final Fantasy 7 as much, if not more, than Final Fantasy 6, which is my favorite. But yeah, I love the game. I spent so many hours in my youth, kind of pouring through it and going through and like. I don't think I ever beat the weapons, just because those were such a hassle and more time than I wanted to invest in them. So I didn't actually beat the weapons until the PS4 version came out a few years back, where it had like the cheats and the accelerate your game stuff. So that's really when I got when I finally beat Ruby and Emerald. But like everything else I had done like time and time again, and to the point that I even had like I remember in that first game, like the crowning achievement was maybe getting Aerith's like level 4 limit break, and like just having that ready to go, because you have to obviously do that before a certain point in the game, or you can't anymore. But yeah, it was like I had so much fun with that game, and so yeah, it's been very much I've been very much looking forward to kind of it making its way out. Like I would certainly prefer some of the other ones to get remastered. Final Fantasy IV did get remastered. I got a an updated version of that for the DS a few years back. But like 6 and 9 in particular are the ones that I would really love to see kind of get this kind of treatment. I don't think they ever will, and I totally understand and respect why 7 has the acclaim and has the the rabid fan base it does. I just prefer, like, as it is, as I'm going through this, a lot of it comes down to, like, I prefer the more lighthearted characters of certainly 6 and 4. I guess like Cecil is a little dour and always sad and angry, like Cloud is here in 7, but or in 4 for Cecil. But yeah, like I just tend to enjoy the more happy-go-lucky nature of someone like Locke in Final Fantasy 6 or Zidane in 9 than getting stuck with kind of like the very dour Cloud. As much as I like Cloud, and he's cool and he's a badass, but so much of the original game and this one as well, he's just kind of like, he's not acting like I want a person to act. He's not reacting to things like I want a person to react to things, but he is still a very iconic character. So it's fun, getting to see him in full HD, high res, wonderfully remastered glory. So what were your kind of expectations coming into this, Cam, into the remake?
Well, we had the opportunity at PAX East I had the opportunity to play the bomb run mission, particularly with the boss fight.
Yeah, like 2 days before it got released to everybody else.
Like the larger demo did, yeah.
Yeah.
And I got to play through that when I got home, and it really made me think, okay, well, I'm really excited. I don't know how I'm going to feel about it once we actually, like, the game starts rolling, because I have a very skewed memory of kind of how Cloud was, and I realized that throughout the game, I never pictured Cloud just like not saying anything or doing anything, as I just kind of expect like it felt like he was playing, and maybe it's because of the dialogue options that you also had in the original game. Mm-hmm. But there was this idea that he was too cool for school. Like, I'm a professional. You guys are all these like eco-terrorist wannabe cool guys. I'm the actual cool guy. And so like Cloud for me never really was a very interesting character. I think like if I were to rate interesting characters, Cloud would be towards the bottom of Final Fantasy VII.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until I played this one and through the remake and getting to see, especially during the bombing run mission, where it's just like what I always thought was him like swooshing his hand through his hair or like fixing his bangs whenever he touched his like hand to his head. I always thought just like that was like an aesthetic thing. It didn't hit me until playing this game that it's like, oh, he's having like these pain headaches from the Mako and from like and everything else about his character. I didn't realize like that was what that was. I just thought he was just a dick.
Yeah, we can dive into that a little bit in some of the kind of when we start talking about like little story beats and stuff. But yeah, one of the things that I'm really enjoying about the game is how it translates so many of those moments from the like very basic polygonal things to what I see in this version where I'm like, oh, that's what like that whole kind of like subplot would have looked like if they had the resources and the time, because like there's some things where it's just like, oh yeah, I did not pick up on like a lot of this stuff at all.
Nope.
And there is like even with Cloud himself, there's a lot of like the Cloud we get in this game is like a hybrid of what Cloud was in the original game and what they've turned him into in the expanded stuff like Advent Children and Crisis Core. Yeah. They very much turned him more into like emo Cloud versus like I'm a dick badass Cloud in that you originally had.
Yeah, now he's just a depressed emo badass Cloud.
Yeah,
which is great.
But there are some like wonderful moments that like gets to play with that I won't dive into necessarily here, but if we do a kind of a future spoiler version of this conversation, there are a couple. There are a few that I'm just like, oh, I can't wait to talk about this moment with people. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. My own expectations kind of coming into it were like when it first got announced. I was mostly glad because I like predicted the announcement, and I was like, yeah, I finally got like a point at my PlayStation predictions that year, because like my prediction was they're going to delay the like remaster of Final Fantasy VII for PS4 because everybody got pissed off about it at PSX, and they're going to basically say, hey, this has been delayed, or this is they're not going to announce a delay because that's not what you do at E3. I don't know why people ever make that as a prediction, but they're going to basically like excuse it for not having a release date or something because they're going to actually announce that they're finally doing a full remake version of it. And then we got that like epic reveal trailer at the E3 of Dreams or whatever. But like it wasn't really until the E3 like showcase last year where they showed off like the bombing run and kind of went into here's how combat's going to work. You're going to have your hack and slashing attacks will be building up your ATB gauge, and then you'll have your ATB gauge that you can use for turn-based actions, so to speak. And seeing like that whole like extended presentation at the Square Enix conference last year, I walked away from that and what they'd shown off with the Scorpion fight, just being like, this game is only going to be Midgar, but there's still so many iconic and epic like fights in Midgar that I was like, I don't care if this is just like those boss fights. This is still going to be really cool seeing it with like this level of graphical fidelity. So that was when I first really got hyped for it, and then I got to play the bombing run mission at PAX West last year, and it felt as good as I wanted it to feel. And then as soon as we came home from PAX East, like a month and a week ago, despite it feeling like 5 years ago, I like dove back into that and played through that like 3 or 4 different times because it was just like it felt so fun, and it was a nice like cool way to wind down an evening while waiting for the actual game to come out. So yeah, my expectations were like originally very tepid, but then they I was like I'm very excited for what is to come. And there's the whole argument of the game not being the full version of the story or whatever, and I've kind of just resigned myself to thinking about it in the context of like the Final Fantasy 13 trilogy, where it's like this would be game one of the Final Fantasy VII game that they want to make, the Final Fantasy VII trilogy, or however many games it's going to be. This is game one that is going to be a complete story that they're going to tell, and then it just is going to build out from there and continue on the story of these characters. But we just have the knowledge of knowing kind of where the story goes from that first version, and thankfully Square Enix has an idea of where that story goes as well, because I hated the Lightning trilogy because like the characters within your core group of people in that changed violently from game to game. And so it just felt like three different games that they just used the same like assets and character models for. Like Lightning doesn't feel or sound or act the same in 13.2 or Lightning Returns. Like she's a wildly different character in all three of those games. And I don't and so like if you think of what Final Fantasy VII will be as, a trilogy or however many games it's going to be, it's that kind of idea, but with it's basically like that mixed with a Mass Effect in what my hopes are, kind of thing, where it's like we're going to see these characters, we're going to see like tiebacks to the characters that you interact with in this game in future games, and I look very forward to experiencing that with them. I don't know how like leveling and stuff is going to carry over between games. But that's that's a future game problem. But that's kind of how I've gotten to the point of like acceptance with this not being start of Midgar to end of disc 3, and I'm okay with that because it's especially now that I've been playing it for about 30 hours. I'm really enjoying what I've got so far. So speaking of that, where are we at with the game now? You were playing a little bit when I started the Discord call, so I know where you are. And I'm trying to think, because it's like a unique new thing to the game. You're basically in Wall Market. We'll say you're in Wall Market. I'm
in a very peculiar place in Wall Market.
Yeah, you're in a spot in Wall Market that did not exist in the first game.
No, it did not. Yeah. It is very different. The process of doing this is very different, but at the same time, I'm super curious to see, because already I have made decisions that previously were not. Like, let me actually rephrase it. This entire thing is totally different. Wall Market is a totally different city than it was in Final Fantasy VII Original, and it's great.
Yeah,
it's
there are. I love that there are like there are nods to the original Wall Market, though, like going into various places, and like one of the first things I checked out, cause it's not a spoiler or anything, but like that item shop that like when you go back to Wall Market at the end of the original game, you can get like Tifa's like ultimate ability or whatever, but when you go to Wall Market the first time, it's like it shoots a machine gun at you when you try and like push the like it's an automated item creation thing or something like that, and it like malfunctions and shoots a machine gun at you. And I very much appreciated that this one does the exact same thing.
Yep.
Like you walk in there and you push a button and it just like machine gun turret comes down and it's like, oh, okay, yep, that didn't change. Nice. I love the little like nods like that to this. I am also currently in my gameplay in Wall Market, but much later in the game. I am basically at the point in the original game where you're getting ready to go up and kind of storm Shinra's tower.
Nice.
In this game, I was saying to Cameron before we started kind of recording, I've basically gotten the little pop-up that comes up and says, hey, this is your last chance to do side quests and stuff before you kind of go into the end game of the game. So that's about where I'm at. And that's about 30 hours into the game for my playthrough. And it might be a little more, but one of the things I like is that, even when I take a break and leave it on the pause screen while I like go in and do some Animal Crossing stuff or something like that, the pause menu, after like a certain point of idle time, like the timer on your game clock just stops as well until you start like doing stuff again. And I was like, nice, because otherwise I would probably have way more hours in it on my clock than I do. So yeah, that's about where we are. Just for context for anybody coming in who has already beaten the game or who is maybe earlier in the game still. That's just kind of in the context of the original game. That's about where we are. And yeah, I'm very much loving like every little bit of it. The only like little gripe I have are that I don't like how some of the mini games have been like converted. But like that's such a minuscule gripe, and even one of them I hated the first time I was doing it, and then I came back and tried to like a second pass, and figured out like how to understand it better, and it was making like I was blowing it away that second time. So there's still enough things where I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to actually go for the platinum on this one, because I don't know if I want to deal with some of that tedium. But I'm very much enjoying pretty much everything I've played so far. How about you, Cam?
Like 100%. Like this game, combat wise, like everything having to do with the gameplay of this game is phenomenal. Running around Midgar is like, right now I'm in Wall Market, and running around Wall Market, it is just such an incredible opportunity to see, and it's really cool because I didn't even realize it, but a lot of like the stylistic things in Wall Market are like clearly like Wu-Tai influence, and I didn't really think about that before.
Yeah.
Like the idea that this place is like a black market, so Wu-Tai, like, things from Wu-Tai can of course be smuggled in, because this place is a place that was walled off because they couldn't do with it. It's cool because it tells us, it takes a piece from, so there is let me actually pull it up real quick, the name of the city, but there was specifically a city in between Hong Kong and China, and during the era of British ownership of Hong Kong, let me see this here, Shadow City.
Is it Macau?
No, it's let me see this here, Shadow City, China, Hong Kong.
You were saying it's basically Wall Market is very influenced by like real events.
Yeah, there was a real like city. It was like Kowloon walled city. That's what it was. Yes. So Kowloon walled city was an ungoverned, densely populated settlement in Kowloon City, Hong Kong. It was originally a Chinese fort, like Chinese military fort. Then it was supposedly belonged to the United Kingdom, but the United Kingdom didn't want to manage it, and so they said no, it belongs to China, and China's like, no, it doesn't belong to us, it belongs to you. And so it became this like ungoverned, like this shadow city, this walled city, and it was literally just a enormous giant shanty city made up of just like all kinds of building materials. It was a place where like is very famous for like quote unquote you can find anything there. It was there was a photographer who went through and like photographed it. I used to work with a guy who had that, like had the dude's book of all of the photos of the city, and it is like, so this city is kind of, especially in kung fu movies from like the 80s and 90s, is super popular. Like it's, a lot of places are like based off of the city. Sometimes it even takes place in Kowloon, and it's such an interesting idea, and then to have them take that and give a representation of that in this game, literally calling it Wall Market. So they do that, but it also has influences from the Asian aesthetic Wu-Tai, which is is referenced a lot in the beginning of the game, but you don't really get a firm perspective of like what Wu-Tai is until you go visit it later on.
Mm-hmm.
In the original game, and this time they've kind of put it more up front, like Wu-Tai is a bigger deal than it was before.
Yeah, that's an element even in itself where like when I played like the original game, I don't think I ever thought about the idea that like Midgar and Wu-Tai had been at war or something like that. Even when you get to the Wu-Tai sections of the game, it wasn't really until Final Fantasy Crisis Core where like that's more the era that you're kind of playing in.
Yeah.
that was like examined to me, and so I love that like that's something that has been carried on into this game and in some of the expanded kind of like world building that they've added is that the war is still very fresh on everybody's minds. It's one of those things like I only really can my only real memories of like the Wutai War, thinking back on like my original playthroughs of Final Fantasy VII, are like the flashbacks you get with like Elmira or something, where she's waiting for her husband to come home from war, and finds Aerith instead, kind of thing. Like that's like the extent I can even think of. It's like the analog that I have in my head is in the very first Pokemon Red and Blue, like Lieutenant Surge, says like, oh, the war took a lot of people or whatever, and that became like the spun off fan theory of like that's why there's no dads in the world, is that they were all died in the wars, whatever. Like it was such like an almost a throwaway kind of thing that I never thought about it how like that was influencing the rest of the world. I was just like, oh, Wall Market has like Japanese influences because the game was made in Japan. That makes sense to me. But yeah, it's cool seeing that kind of fleshed out and really examined in the much bigger version of it that we get here in Remake.
Well, if you can give more detail about like why, like especially between these characters and like what were the war stories that Cloud was inspired by to join Soldier? Well, it was the stories from the Wutai War about Soldier First Class and Sephiroth, the hero of the Wutai War, etc. And so you have all this stuff about like that they put in the original game, but it's not really given any moment of like even a momentary spotlight. It's just kind of like background garble. Like you could have put anything in there in the original game, but here there's actual context and there's more important stuff about it, because certain events cause like it to be brought up again. But what I really enjoyed about Wall Market, especially not just Wall Market, but walking around Sector 7 slums, which was just such a like a weird like dirt city shanty town, like not even really a shanty town, just a handful of shacks in the first game. And in this game they kind of like flush it out where like, yeah, this is actually like kind of like it's in a hole in the ground. Like Sector 7 slums are literally in like a hole in the ground, where the rest of this like dirt and like small hills and like or like very small mountains of like rock formation are around it. And then like there's the train that takes people to Midgar, and outside of that it's just a very dirt based shanty town. And then you kind of see Sector 5 slums, both the abandoned part and the central part, where it does... Oh my gosh. Sorry, I just flashed thinking about Aerith's house, Elmira's house in Sector 5 Central. Like, that area is just breathtaking.
Yeah. Yeah, I think... And like, and the church in Sector 5 slums and stuff, like they do a great job of really translating a lot of those like iconic locations and stuff like that.
One thing I will say though, we got to talk about whoever was in charge of texturing doors in this game.
Yeah, that is an issue. But
I don't know if it's just a rendering issue, like, oh, it's there, but it's just not rendering. That'll get patched in later, hopefully. Or if it's just like, no, the textures there are kind of gabagoo.
Yeah, it's what it is. Like when like I got to imagine hundreds and hundreds and thousands of hours were put on making like Tifa look as amazing as she does, and Aerith, and all the character models basically looking like you are just controlling Advent Children but better.
Yeah.
Then I'm like I'm willing to give a little bit of a pass to random doors that I walk by that I'm not going to be looking at too much in this game.
It's just the door to your apartment in Sector 7.
Yeah.
It was the first time I saw that, and it was jarring, to say the least. I felt so, like, up until this point, I'm like, the graphical fidelity on this game is amazing. Sometimes the textures take, like, a second or two to load up, but that's fine, whatever. Like, it's running this amazing game. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And then, that door just never changes, never updates, and it's just like...
It basically, for those that haven't played, it's like you're in, like, a little, like, like a motel kind of apartment thing, and there's basically like room 201, room 202, room 203, and you're in 202, and you walk by these doors, and it looks like the door is just like waiting to load in before you'll see like the 202 there on the placard, and it just never does. That was a weird little thing. I'm like, when this comes to PC, I'm sure people will like have a field day patching that in and creating mods and stuff for those kinds of elements.
And here's the thing: I wouldn't even doubt that while we're talking right now on the like post-launch like update thing, they're gonna have like, because here's the thing: it's entirely possible that the textures are there, but there's a bug on why they're not loading correctly.
Yeah,
and that can be addressed in a future patch, and that can be patched in and fixed, and that'll be fine.
Yeah.
If it was something they needed to do at the time to like, okay, if we take the like texture like loading here and instead put that effort over here in this other part, I get that too. Like there are decisions made when you make a game, especially a game as big as this game, as beautiful as this game.
Yeah,
where
really,
you're gonna
like
make decisions, and it's like I get where you're coming from, and if I have to suffer through bad doors, I'm okay suffering through bad doors.
And that like that's I feel like there are very few of those moments where I get like pulled out of the game because of that kind of stuff. There have been a couple where it's like, oh, like it looks like that's a not rendered thing, but again, it's almost always in passing, and like I move on to the next fight or something like that, and it's out of sight, out of mind. So it's
same thing. Not just the door. Cloud's sink has like shampoo bottle and a conditioner bottle that are just hexagons and aren't even really textured at all. Those are two big things that I noticed right off the bat that I'm like, this is bugging me on some level. Granted, everything else is gorgeous. Cloud is just like amazing. Like Barrett, I didn't even realize Barrett had all these scars on him.
Yeah, that's like exactly those are the things I'm like. That's what I think about when I think of like the graphical fidelity and design of this game. Not that when I look at the sink over in Cloud's apartment, the mirror does that thing in video games where it's not reflecting anything because they don't want to have to render two of Cloud. Like that all makes sense to me. I'm fine with that because of how cool and great Cloud looks, and how like the grand scale level of a lot of the environments look. Like the fact that there's that they took like basically one matte painting's worth of a screen from the original game and built it into like a shanty town with back alleys and pathways that you can like run around.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like a lot of those, there's not a whole ton of detail in there, but considering like what the source of those things was and really what the intent of them is in this game, to really just say like, hey, there's a lot of people in here in this area, and they're kind of beaten down by Shinra, and they are in the slums. Like you get that feeling based on what they give you. You don't need to go into every little hut to know that, or you don't even need to look at every little hut. You just see all of those huts packed together with like stray cats roaming around, and people just kind of like sitting outside on the ground, down on their luck. Like you get what that city is supposed to be. You get what the Sector 7 slums is in a way that like, if they don't have 202 on the door number, I'm okay with that because of everything else they have that tells me that story.
And here's the thing, if I'm nitpicking about just like these very minor things, that tells you just how much I'm not like complaining about anything else in this game.
Yeah. I like
my experience through everything else in this game has just been just amazing. Probably one of my favorite things though is the upgrade system for weapons.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. Kind of some of the like quality. I guess I could lump that into like combat, because it's certainly a core factor of combat, and that's one of the things I wanted to touch on. But yeah, the materia system is more or less the same as it was. They have a wide array of different materia, and they're much easier to level up in this abbreviated story than in the other. But they also don't like when you master a materia, it doesn't like respawn a new materia for you, which I would do. Like that was how I got so much gil in the original game. Is I would like level up my HP ups and MP ups, and then like when I mastered one out, I would sell it for like 1.4 million gil, and just like equip the new like 1-star HP up on my character, because I was never like hurting that much. It was more like I was leveling this up for that epic payday. It was basically that was talking about Animal Crossing earlier. That was how I was making money in Final Fantasy VII was leveling up those HP and MP ups on like my triple AP materia weapons and stuff back in the day. So I'm like, oh well, but at the same time, like I get that for what this game is and the size of the story this game is, I don't need 40 different extra copies of those bits of materia and stuff like that. But yeah, the big thing is that that weapons are now like improvable, because there are fewer of them throughout the game than the full length. Although there are like you have more weapons in this section of Midgar than were originally in like Midgar. But yeah, like now you get SP as you level up, and then you can use those SP points to basically add. I want to say like Tim compared it to like the sphere grid in Final Fantasy X, and that's like a good comparison. Is basically like each weapon has like its own little like boosts that you can use that SP to like power up, and some of those are going to be like, oh, if you use like 12 SP, you'll get a new materia slot, or it'll connect the two materia slots so you can like use linked materia and stuff like that. But then a lot of times it is like, hey, here's just a flat attack boost or magic boost, or if you add this bonus, you'll get like 5% to done like 5% increase to your fire damage that you do. So if that character that you have is your fire based character and they're using that fire materia, that's a good skill to give them. But then outside of that, you can basically like go to and from weapons as you go, because all of your weapons gain SP at the same level. So like you start out with the Buster Sword for Cloud, and then by the time you get like the fourth weapon, the Buster Sword is still like getting SP every time you level up, and you can just go back if you want to use the Buster Sword because it has the right mix of attack and magic that you want. Or when the weapon levels up, oh, now I've got these four power-ups I can add to it, and I can use SP to add to them. So I'm going to take the stronger weapon that I have, but I'm going to go back to the Buster Sword because I've got these new abilities now, or I can add more materia to the Buster Sword than I have on this other weapon. So yeah, it's a really dynamic kind of thing that I never even would have thought about. Like I was like, yeah, one of the things you didn't need from the original was like leveling up weapons, but for kind of the expanded version of Midgar here, I appreciate that it adds a new layer of combat to it. So yeah, kind of that's kind of the broad overview, but feel free to hop in with anything I missed or just kind of your general impressions on it, Cam.
I love it. It's a great reason to keep bringing back and like rotating out your weapons, because I found out that like there are certain points in the game where, depending on, because of course I mentioned earlier, I kind of power leveled my way up to mid-20s at this point.
You mentioned that before we started recording. Before we started recording,
yeah. So yeah. I'm at chapter 9 and I'm like level like 23, 24.
And I want to say I'm like level 27, 28 or something like that. Twice as far into the game as Cameron is.
Yeah. There's some sweet spots where you can grind out some stuff, and it's a great way to kind of the reason I did it is actually because I wanted to get more used to having Aerith in my party. Because Aerith, the trade out of her auto attacks being weaker than Barret or Tifa's, is the payoff is like she has more ability to use spells. But part of the problem I had is, managing her casting spells on the right targets, etc., was a thing that I had to deal with. And so getting used to not just relying on my party members to automatically do what I wanted them to do, but to actually like do more of a focus of like switching around between characters, actually kind of, I think, elevated my gameplay a little bit, because now I have a way better understanding of how you're really supposed to be playing the game.
Yeah, no, it took me a while to get that, but yeah, you don't want to just sit on Cloud and then just play as Cloud. It especially, yeah, it took me probably 15, 20 hours to really start figuring out, like, oh, okay, like I'm just gonna bounce between these characters, and once they're doing the base level damage that they're doing, and now they've got an ATB bar, now's the time I'm gonna switch over to that character and try and be them, or I will build up Cloud's ATB bar and then like let him just kind of hack and slash for a little bit, because I want to use Barrett's ability that will do extra stagger damage or something before I use Cloud's ability that'll do like really buff damage. So I'll switch to Barrett and I'll like build up his ATB gauge and stuff like that. So yeah, it is figuring out the different strategies, and a lot of those are changing based on the enemies that I'm fighting and stuff. Once you get the assess materia, which is basically like scan, like I'm like, okay, that's the first thing I do, and anytime I'm like in combat with a new enemy, I'm like, okay, let me scan this guy, figure out what I got to do, and then I don't know, I'm sure you've caught on to this now, but if you've already scanned people, you can just use the touchpad in combat, and it'll pull up basically what you scanned on them. But the game doesn't tell you that. So for anybody who's playing that didn't know that, that's what you do. If you're in combat, hit the touchpad and it'll kind of pause and give you the layout of here's what this guy's weak to, if you've already assessed them. But yeah, like so I'll hop into combat and be like, okay, I don't remember the best strategy to take these guys out. Let me check that out and then kind of adjust combat accordingly.
Yeah. It's great, and I'm really excited to then later get back to Barrett and Tifa, because I'm going to be able to start like really rotating through them properly this time around, I think. So I'm very excited for that. But usually, like, basically I realized Aerith, you can like stack her to basically just be like this glass cannon who also will heal you.
Yeah.
To just like throw out, like, I have Blizzara, Thundara, and Fyra at this point. And so like I've loaded her up with all those, and so at any point it's like, okay, cool, Cloud assess who has what weaknesses. Okay, hop over now to Aerith, go ahead and start launching spells as per enemy dictates, or if like it's not going to work, I'll have Cloud use like barrier on himself to then start doing more tanking damage, and then start there's so much to do and like to do with this system that you can just kind of hack and slash your way through it, and like you can still get by, but the depth of the layers of depth on this combat go deep, and I am so excited to see how much further it goes in the next iteration as I continue to grow my power. And but what I really loved about the upgrading of the weapon system is, so depending on where you're at in the game, at certain points different weapons will have higher stats than the others. So it's not like oh well, I have this weapon now I should just like sell or get rid of this weapon. Keep them, and then like you have to keep them. You can't sell them. At least I haven't found a way to. Yeah, no. And then from there, but like, because there are points where like my iron sword was better than the Buster sword, and then all of a sudden the Buster sword had all these points accumulated. I poured that in, and its next core unlocked because I got up to my next weapon level, and got access to more attack bonus abilities. And now, depending on whether or not I want Cloud to be focused more on materia and magic, or more on physical attack, is when I decide to swap between them. However, now I have his the sword I forgot what it's called, but it's the one with like the kanji on the blade. You get it in Hard Edge in Wall Market. You get it. Mm-hmm. And I have that right now, and I'm loving that. But I'm excited to see, okay, well, I know how these cores are all set up. I'm wondering what happens when I get to the next weapon level and unlock it for, like, where are these weapons going to end up laying out? And then, of course, I plan on going back to what's his name. Won't spoil it for you guys, because that's an interesting encounter to have. And, like, there's somebody who can reset your abilities, basically.
Yeah.
and you can then respec your way through. So I'm excited once I get my way through initially at level 5, kind of have an idea of what I want from each weapon, and then kind of deciding how to swap them out from there. But it's great. It's even to the point where you can upgrade it so it gets another slot for materia. So you don't have to worry about losing out on access to materia. I will say I was super disappointed with the nail bat this time around.
Why?
Because like it's not as strong as I thought it was going to be.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, they traded off though, because in the original game, yeah, like the nail bat is no materia, but it's like super buff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas this one, maybe it starts with no materia, but you can because one of the first things I do anytime I like get a new weapon is I go through and I immediately add I add as many materia slots as I'm able to, because I'm like I don't want to go from the 4 I have in my current weapon to 2 in this new weapon and lose a couple. So let me like pour the SP points into that materia first as like my baseline of action. And then I'll start using them in those buffs and the upgrades and stuff like that.
So the nail bat's interesting because it's actually more based off of the idea of critting. So the nail bat has a bunch of things that gives it a bonus to whether or not it's going to crit, and then when it does crit, it does how much damage it does.
Mm-hmm.
So you can make that thing like if you use it, it can become this incredible powerhouse. I realized, but its base attack is fairly low, and I'm like, that's such a cool way to differentiate this weapon, though.
Yeah.
Where it is focused on getting as many hits in as possible to then try to... Like, this thing's made to be in Punisher mode. Because you can just swing this thing around and then get as many as you possibly can.
Yeah, you're basically hitting home runs every time you do the... when you're in... is it Punisher mode?
Punisher.
It's Punisher, and what's the other one?
Operator.
Operator. Yeah, okay. And I gotta... Because I see the thing saying like, "Oh, Punisher mode," and I got to remember, "Oh, that's not the mode I'm on. That's the mode if I push triangle, I'm going to go into." But yeah, like I use the nail bat. So you get that in the Sector 5 slums, and there's like a mini game in Sector 5 where you're basically
where you break boxes,
where you're running around breaking boxes that are worth points and stuff. And that was where I first really I equipped the nail bat and was using it for that. And I went into to operator mode or Punisher mode and was like just like beating the crap out of some of those giant boxes, and like 2 or 3 of hits in Punisher mode with the nail bat was like busting them open for me. So I was like, yeah, that's the way to get the high scores in that mini game and that kind of thing. But it was even that was like I mean, even that feeds into one of the details I love about combat is that the different weapons you have behave differently in combat. And yeah, if you're swinging around the nail bat, it acts like you're swinging around a baseball bat and not the hack and slash of the Buster Sword or Hard Edge or something like that.
It's not this heavy sword that Cloud is swinging around. It's this baseball bat, and he's just like going through it. And like that's the thing I realized that when I was leveling. Power leveling and grinding was I was like, I want to try out the nail bat because I'm like, I really want to see what the point of this nail bat is. I upgraded all the critical stuff on it. Sure, let's take it to work. And sure enough, like if you crit with that thing, it does like, an enormous amount of damage, like a disgusting amount of damage. But I found I couldn't really rely on it because there's moments where especially since I was teamed with Aerith at the time, I had to be the protector. I had to be in operator mode to do more defensive stuff and to do more things like and like maneuvering around and dodging abilities, especially from the smoker guys.
Yeah. That's even that is
also I want to mention also just one last thing about this. The way that they have taken dumb, stupid enemies from the game, the original game, and made them into like legitimate pains in my ass are incredible.
Yeah, that's
just awesome.
I'm very I joked or I teased beforehand where you're at, and like the next fight you have coming up is one of those where it's like it was an otherwise mindless fight in the original game kind of thing, but here it's going to be this epic battle that'll eat your lunch. Maybe not you because you've leveled up twice as much as you need to, but for me it was like a 15-minute epic encounter kind of thing for something that would have been like a 15-second fight in the original game.
Oh my gosh! Can we talk about the summons in this game?
Sure, yeah.
They're so good.
They're
like so cool. Oh my gosh, I love.
They're an element that like I love, and especially because I got the soldier first class like edition of the game because I wanted the collector stuff and everything. So I got like the Cactor and Carbuncle and like Choco,
baby chick Chocobo.
Yeah, baby chick Chocobo or whatever. So like I have each of those, and those work like those are fun basically in the section of the game before you start getting the real summons. But yeah, like the summons in this behave akin to, I would say, how they behaved in Final Fantasy 15, where you summon them and then they're like out there fighting alongside you, right? Am I remembering that game correctly?
It felt like in Final Fantasy 15, it was more like they were part of like the world and topography, and so like they were acting as like agents of the world. Like they were so large and humongous and powerful that it felt like they were doing stuff to the world that around you and the terrain and whatnot. And then in this game, I would say it's more like...
It's more 13.
I would say it's 13, or I would even say 12. With when you summon one of the Eidolons in that game, they act as kind of like an automatic unit for you.
Yeah. But like it doesn't... It's not taking out the rest of your party. Your party's still there. It's just another body on the field. And you can use your abilities instead of like casting Cure or using Braver or something like that. You can use those ability points to basically say, hey, Ifrit, like you attack this enemy for me.
And they'll auto attack as well still.
Yeah, they'll auto attack. But like, and then that's shared. Anybody in your party can use their ability points to like, even if I have Ifrit attached to Cloud, like Tifa can still, use her ability points to direct Ifrit to attack.
Did I abuse that system? Great.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. Yes, but one of the trade-offs is that like you can't summon at will. Like summons don't show up in every battle and stuff.
Summons work more like limit breaks.
Yeah.
Than they do.
You'll occasionally get like a summon meter that'll pop up and it'll be like, okay, the summon is coming. I just have to wait for this meter to come up, and then I can figure out which of the summons I'm using. So yeah, it's and there are some of the lower tier summons like Carbuncle or Cactar or whatever. Those come up way more frequently and are and come up way quicker and stuff like that compared to Ifrit and Shiva. That you get later in the game.
I've still yet to summon Shiva. Because she takes forever to load up. But she's stinking powerful when I fought her. So
yeah, I've only gotten her maybe once or twice, I think, in my game, at least that I can think of.
And then I have Aerith equipped with Carbuncle because Carbuncle's awesome.
Nice.
Just like, do you want free barrier and magic barrier? Okay, here you go.
And that's you mentioned that in terms of like your approach to combat and stuff, and it's interesting because I very much when I originally played Final Fantasy VII, and even in this one, like I'm much more brute force, and I don't use status effects or barrier kind of magic as much as I maybe should. Like it might make my life easier sometimes if I was using those kinds of things. Whereas I'm much more like I'm going to hack and slash. I'm going to use my elemental spells as needed. That's just how I've almost always approached Final Fantasy games. But I appreciate that like depth is still there if you want to go down that rabbit hole. And some of the flavor text of enemy assessments and whatnot will basically say, hey, use this ability to increase stagger or to prepare yourself for increasing stagger and stuff like that. And that's where like I'll see that and I'll be like, oh yeah, maybe I should like try a different approach or something like that. So I love that that's still out there for anybody who wants to like play with it still supports multiple different play styles.
Yeah. There was a fight with a character who I was like, why am I struggling so much with this guy? Like, he is not that strong. I'm just like letting him get way too into his combos with me. And I realized I did the assessment. It's like, oh, okay, I just need a block when he first tries to do his dumb, like really telegraphed attack on me. And then he gets like put under pressure, and then I can just like wail on him. And I was like, after that, the fight was cake. I was like, I should use my assess more often.
Yeah, and that's one of those like even in in the bombing mission that you could play on the demo kind of thing, the game doesn't do a great job of like explaining, hey, like your Punisher mode, like using block will counterattack some of those enemies, and that's how you're supposed to fight some of those enemies. Is you're supposed to counterattack them because that's how you'll get them higher to or quicker to stagger and all that kind of stuff. And so there have been a ton of fights where like I've realized that like halfway through the fight. Whereas like the first half of the fight, I'm like, God, why is this so hard? What the hell's going on? And then like I'll switch there and I'll try that out and I'll be like, oh, okay, that just made this way easier for me doing that. And that's one of the elements that I still struggle with a little bit here, or even 30 hours in, is I still, because it gives you a dodge and a block, I treat it still too much more like an action game, whereas like I feel like, oh, I can dodge some of these attacks. And it's like, no, you can't dodge these attacks. They are attacks that are going to come and do damage to you sometimes, and blocking is the smarter way to go. But because I'm in my mind, because I'm thinking of it like an action game, I think I can dodge roll out of the way or something like that. And so then when I still die, I'm like, what the hell? But that's just I need to work through that kind of thing. But yeah, like I like 30 hours in, and I'm still very much loving the combat, and enjoying more and more ways to explore the combat, and especially now that like I have mastered some of my materia. I'm doing what I did when I originally played Final Fantasy VII, and that's where I'm switching to throw barrier on just to level that materia up, just so I can have it mastered and use, reflect or something if I really need to, if the occasion really calls for it. But it wasn't like in my, regular repertoire of materia. So like now that I'm into kind of that like second tier materia that I'm enjoying kind of the different flavors that I'm getting in some of this stuff.
Yeah, no, it's the combat in this game alone is worth the while. Not to mention like the incredible stuff they've changed in the characters and story.
Yeah. So let's dive into kind of characters and story a little bit. Again, staying more or less spoiler free, but just like obviously this is taking what was 5 to 10 generously hours in the original game and stretching it out to a 35 to 40 hour campaign. So much stuff has been fleshed out. We've already talked about some of it with like Wall Market. You kind of get more history and context behind Wall Market that wasn't in the first game. That I like going to kind of what you were talking about, the Wu Tai influences that you have in that design. Like it's explicitly stated, like, yeah, here's some of the here's influences of the Wu Tai War on Midgar, and people are uneasy because of that, and there's these like rumors that Avalanche is funded by Wu Tai, and that is there's like an extra level of like xenophobia going on.
Nationalism for sure is real here, and it's being used by Shinra, and it's like, huh, cool, okay.
Yeah. And so yeah, like I've loved like every little extra thing that it has added and fleshed out. Obviously, your core kind of Avalanche crew of Jesse Biggs and Wedge get a lot more screen time in this game, and so they get a lot more kind of like they have their own backstories and kind of where they come from and what got them into the fight, and getting to like explore that and see those characters fleshed out. Like I've loved every little bit of that. And like until I got to Aerith, like I was sitting there being like, wow, Jesse and Tifa are just like going one for one on like who has my affection in the moment. And then Aerith comes into the picture and kind of like you're reminded of like, oh, it's really Tifa and Aerith are kind of your primary thing. But Jesse gets so much more like, fun and flirtatious vibes to her, that like it adds a whole other level to kind of Cloud's dynamic, that I just was like, am I Team Jesse now? For the the first half of the game kind of thing.
Here's the thing. Jesse is more thirsty than an Inuit in the Sahara.
Yeah.
The thirst levels off of Jesse from the original game were already like peak, like, or what we previously thought were peak levels of thirst. Those previous levels of thirst have been proven to be low on the spectrum, and she is for reals super duper thirsty in this game. Like,
Yeah, I don't
just
even
like
see it.
she's like one verbiage away from basically just at this point just starting to make pure innuendos about wanting to bang Cloud.
I mean, like, I don't even see it as thirsty so much as just like flirty to the extreme. Like, I feel like she would be fine if Cloud were not there. Like, she can, like,
She's a strong, confident, powerful woman. For
exactly. Sure. She would absolutely manage without Cloud there. But Cloud comes in, and yeah, she has, and I think like there's an element of it that I think feeds into the fact that Cloud is such a stoic kind of like not responding to people flirting with him the way that normal people would respond to that. It's almost like she's trying harder because of how unresponsive he is to any kind of passes or any of that kind of stuff.
He's not playing the flirting game, and for her, this is like, also I just want to say the background and like development they've done on Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge's like backstory is incredible, because it's not just Jesse. Jesse really takes kind of the spotlight, but seeing more of how, because I think for me, like especially Biggs was just kind of like a whatever throwaway character, and Wedge to an extent. Wedge, of course, had the dynamic of being the fat guy model in Polygonal, the first famous fat guy in Polygons for sure. But the way that they bring up, and it's like, well, it's very clear that Jesse is like the brains, Biggs is like the calm, the stoic, like the kind of cool hand that he has throughout situations, and then Wedge is 100% like the heart at all of this, of those three.
Yeah.
And it's so great to see, and like that to Barrett's muscle, and kind of like seeing how Avalanche fits as a unit, like instead of just like some random Les Resistance type like unit that they're definitely dressed up to be. Also, nobody else is wearing armor in this game.
Yeah.
They're wearing like pot metal steel armor. Like Jesse and Wedge are. Biggs is just wearing like regular clothes, and he has a gun.
Yeah, I mean they're guerrilla fighters, so like they like, especially Biggs, I think exemplifies that more so than anything else. But yeah, like Biggs and Wedge have long since been like just kind of like throwaway characters since they started getting added in Final Fantasy IV, I think. And so they're pretty much like, oh, it's a cute little nod to Biggs and Wedge of Star Wars, neat. But that they get completely fleshed out here because you're taking, it's like taking what would be a movie version of the story and turning it into a Netflix series version of the story.
Yeah, very much so.
So you're getting more time with each of those characters. You're getting kind of little side conversations with them to kind of explain where they came from, what they're doing, and then the performance is just also all great. Like across the board, I don't think I've like come across really any performance from like, oh, that was I didn't like that. Everything about kind of the characters and how they're being fleshed out. And then, yeah, there are a ton of new characters that are getting introduced too that like were not at all in the original game, and it's just because you're spending a lot more time in the Sector 7 slums now, and kind of going on like little side missions and side quests in there. You get people like Marl, the landlord that kind of has her relationship with Tifa and wants to make sure you're not going to like mess with that or something like that. And then, yeah, just other various characters in like a ton of new characters get introduced in Wall Market that are just kind of like adding a whole new dynamic to like the lore and the power of that town and all that kind of stuff, and it's fun seeing like the recognizable characters pop up, but then it's also fun just being like, okay, what new things am I going to meet in this place? It's like who's around the corner? Is it going to be somebody I know? Is it going to be somebody new? I love kind of the expanded story that we're getting because of that.
Oh, I do want to say shout out to Brianna White, who is playing Aerith.
Aerith. Yep.
She apparently, like from what I understand, she's just like a YouTuber who also is a voice actress, and she just got this role and she's killing it. Like, I never thought I would hear the great thing they've done, especially as far as characters goes, is there's like an update to the dynamic to make everybody, I think, feel like, as much as we talked about Cloud not really reacting how people normally react to stuff, it's really interesting to see Aerith and Tifa be written in a much more like modern way of writing characters, to the point where like there's a lot more sass to Aerith this time around, to the point where there's a moment where something happens and she literally just says like she just like just basically just like calls out just like fuck. And it's just like it's like, oh cool. She's like, this Aerith swear. Eris never swore. Eris was basically a nun outside of an outfit, or outside of her habit. She's
not as demure.
Yeah, Aerith says fucking shit. It's like awesome.
Yeah, I like that. That's absolutely like I love the writing of these characters, and again, like to the performances. Britt, I want to say Britt Baron is playing Tifa, and I like. When that casting got announced, I was like, oh, I liked her in Glow, like the first couple seasons. I haven't watched like season 3 and on of Glow, but like I remember enjoying her, and I love what she's bringing to the table with Tifa, because I've always been Team Tifa in my my like standing, just because I'm the kind of guy that would like fall for the girl next door kind of growing up childhood friend thing.
And here's the thing: I was not originally Team Tifa. I was originally Team Eris. However, as I got older, I realized like there's more to the story, and we won't get into that because that's definitely deep spoiler territory. But there's really more to, and I'm really interested to see how they're going to flesh it out going forward with her character in the remake. Because there's a lot of things that I just got to a point where it's actually a pretty pivotal point in Aerith's and Cloud's budding friendship and relationship and camaraderie when they sit on top of the jungle gym. And it's a very iconic point in the original game at this moment, because it leads off into like it leads to the wall market and everything else. But the way they did it here, and this is definitely something I want to shout out, because what they did together as far as I'm trying to think of what is the name of Cloud's voice actor.
Oh, I don't know his name off the top of my head. Somebody who I hadn't recognized.
Yeah, he was the only one that wasn't at PAX East when they were doing like the autograph signing. So I don't recall his name, but him and Brianna White have this really great reimagining of this iconic scene in a way that I actually think is less of a flirty or relationship building thing and more really touching on points that will become much more relevant later on in the game, or in the following games, about more about Aerith's past. Like, Aerith does kind of show up in this game as, and in the original games, kind of this waif that kind of like almost like a manic pixie dream girl, except if a manic pixie dream girl was actually like a nun, but then every once in a while had like these weird moments of like whimsy. Aerith just comes off as somebody in this game as that. Just I really love this portrayal of Aerith, and I think part of the problem is also kind of I don't know if like the deification that happened with Eris in the original game, especially with the fandom and kind of how they like her place in like the lore of the world in the game, etc. Once again, try not to get into spoiler territory here, but there's a lot of baggage with Eris that I'm liking, that this is a fresh take for Aerith to really be her own character and kind of go forward. And I think Tifa's characterization, and especially being done terrifically by Britt Baron, is just phenomenal. Just this is not a, oh, hey, you're back in my life, and I'm like, what's up? Hey, curling my hair, kind of like the idea that you kind of get in the original game. But in this one, it's much more of there is a tension and a trepidation between these two characters because of things that are very, like, one critique I have about the story is they give away way too much about a certain incident way too early, in my opinion.
I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but also, like, they give it away if you know what it is. If you know what those glimpses that you're seeing are, they give that kind of stuff away. But if you don't know, it's just like it's the same argument I make with people flipped out about recently or over the holidays. They flipped out about like Jedi Fallen Order giving away, you know, the end of the game or whatever. It's like they're only giving away the end of the game if you know that that's the end of the game. Like otherwise, it's just a moment in the game that is going to be an obvious selling point of the game. So it's like there are moments and glimpses that you see, yes, that for people who know the story and have played like a lot of or played or seen like the expanded stuff, there are lots of like hints and teases of, you know, stuff that you know. But at the same time, like a lot of that gets fleshed out. Like I see it as right outside Midgar, the first town you go to in the original game, Calm, you get like a giant exposition dump that fills you in on like the backstory of this world. And I see a lot of what they're doing in this game is just kind of taking moments from that and putting them into this game to make it, you know, to flesh those moments out, make them make sense, or, you know, put them in appropriate moments relevant to like what Cloud's going through or something like that.
Sure.
So it's just kind of pulling a lot of those story elements up a little bit in terms of like the bigger tale that they're telling.
And here's the thing,
just because
I'm cool with that.
Otherwise, like it would be a very self-contained Midgar-centric story that you don't necessarily know how it ties into Cloud's past or Tifa's past or Aerith's past, or just this world in general, what has happened out there. So I like that you're getting the occasional hints of those like little flashback moments or stuff like that yeah, comes across as a spoiler to us who know the story, but to somebody coming in fresh doesn't.
I don't have an issue with any of that, what you just said.
Okay.
My issue, there's a very particular singular scene towards the beginning of the game after the bombing mission, where I felt too much was given away as far as dialogue is given. I think this, like the scenery and everything is totally fine. I felt like there was some dialogue points where I'm like, I would have like not done those dialogue points here, maybe, because I feel like it gives too much away about this mysterious person and kind of like their quote unquote alignment to Cloud too early, I felt. But that's a very, once again, I'm referencing this as something I don't like. Very small minor point. Like
yeah. The same, like on that same note, there are like so many moments that like in the original game are just like, oh, the screen is black and then like a text block comes up with words or something like that, like wake up or something like that. And it like I love how some of those things are being like represented in this version.
As well.
Compared because like they put the original game in a whole new light for me in some of those moments, and I love seeing that kind of stuff and how that's been fleshed out. So yeah, I look forward to diving more into that when we dive into kind of the spoiler chats. Cody Christian, Cody Christian, by the way, was who plays Cloud Strife.
There we go. He is phenomenal.
Yeah, he's doing a great job.
A great way of like the moments where Cloud is like acting like an actual person, like his human moments, are so good in this game. Mm-hmm. Like
he has, you're coming up on probably one of my favorite laugh out loud moments in the game so far, that you will be coming up upon in the next depending on how much more grinding you want to do, I don't know, 4 hours or something like that, but in the sequence that you're in, it's coming up, and like it's just like it was one line and I was just in stitches because of how it's delivered and how it ties into to everything that's going on and stuff. But yeah, like one of the other things that you kind of touched on a little bit with kind of how Aerith is getting a different interpretation than Eris maybe. One of the things I think again that I love about this is a game that now exists in a post-Advent Children and a post-Crisis Core world, so there is so much more to draw from on characterizations of these characters, and they take full advantage of that. Like the Aerith and the Tifa that we get in this, and Cloud as well, feel like continuations of Crisis Core in a way that the original game doesn't necessarily, because Crisis Core was not a figment in anybody's imagination when the original game came out. And so, like, there's extra legwork that has been done for those characters that has been continued on in this, and I think does a great job kind of, again, like you said, fleshing out or reinforcing character traits of these characters that were not overly present in the original game, and just because we're getting more time with them and they're getting more time with like each other, like there's a sequence, there's an extended sequence that you'll have with kind of Cloud and Tifa and Aerith, that given the like romantic triangle that happens there could be a lot more tense, but like there and in the original game there's not too much going on between those three characters, kind of thing. It's mostly action. You're going from like point A to point B and fighting a whole bunch of stuff in between. There's not a whole bunch of like scenes and dialogue, and this game adds scenes and dialogue in there to help establish the dynamics of these characters, and you know, who relates to who and how quickly they relate, and you know, that how easy it might be for them to both gang up and tease Cloud a lot more. And it's just, there are moments like that I love that this game really kind of gets to explore as a result, and I will continue to enjoy how the saga continues kind of exploring a lot of those elements.
Before we move on, I just realized something.
Yeah.
If you were to take Cloud's character in Crisis Core and kind of see this as like the following like course of that character, it fits. I like,
yeah.
Okay,
oh,
I love that. I just, it just clicked for me just now. Just like while you were saying this, I was like, oh, this is just like, this is exactly how Crisis Core Cloud would be acting in this game. It's not the base game where we kind of like, you have dialogue trees, etc. No, this is that kind of like deeply like insecure person from that game transport, like with all the stuff that's happened, and that is actually really awesome.
Yeah, it's, I mean, like, as much as anything else, like I really want to go back and play Crisis Core when I'm done with this game, and I wish it were easier to do.
Crisis Core, by the way, anybody who hasn't played it, that game is a straight up like incredible banger of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, phenomenal game. Like the stuff with Genesis and Angeal, I'm like, I could hit or miss on that kind of stuff, but what it does for Cloud and Zack and Tifa and Aerith, and Sephiroth even, like I love that, and that was well worth being added into the mythos for all that stuff. But yeah, let's dive into, unless you have any other final kind of character or story beats to tackle. We talked a little bit. Yeah,
defrosting of Barrett towards Cloud, very good, very subtle, very slow burn, very good though.
I mean, like that's Barrett in general is an incredible standout character in the game for me.
Both the original and in this one, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like in the original, like I loved him for being like the guy that was, you know, throwing out all the obscenities that were being censored and stuff. But getting, I want to say John Bentley something, John Eric Bentley, who plays Barrett in this, is phenomenal, and like he is still easily like, of your core group of people, the most over the top cartoony, but like he makes it work, and it's endearing, and like you get why he's super passionate about the things he's super passionate about. The fact that he's like, you will occasionally, you know, after a fight, he will sing the da 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 da, like
so good.
Like as I hear it, when I hear it in the game, I'm like, none of the other characters could get away with doing that. Like, but he can, and he does, and it's a great way of, you know, incorporating that iconic, you know, element of the original game in this new interpretation of it. Like the fact that he does it himself as his own fanfare to like celebrate having beaten some Shinra jerks or something like that. I love it, and he's he's the only character that can get away with that because it would not at all be natural coming out of Cloud, and then Tifa and Aerith just wouldn't vibe in the same way. I could see them like playing along with it, but yeah, the fact that it is being driven by Barrett is just one of the many elements of Barrett that I love in this, and yeah, I agree that because we get so much more time with these characters and they're going on side missions and things that happen in between the big moments that you see in the original game, to kind of help build out the story. You get to see a more gradual, those characters growing on one another, compared to what we got in the original game. And I love Barrett. He's been a delight, a pure and utter delight throughout the entire game.
So good.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about some of the graphical stuff early on, but yeah, I want to just again go and highlight the fact that like this game looks so good for like 99% of it.
I'd say 99.8% of the game.
Yeah,
so good.
There are very very minor things here and there, but the action, everything is so beautiful. The enemy designs, and it is like the way that they've re-envisioned enemies from the original game, and they're in their polygonal form, and like brought them into this game and made them things that work within this world, be it monsters being kind of fiendish creatures, or the robot things like the sweepers that are basically like cars that have feet and saw blades and stuff. Like it makes sense in how they're introduced, and some of the bosses as well, and how they're introduced in like, oh yeah, this is a prototype design for anti personnel attackers or something like that. They do a great job of like respecting the original designs in all of their ludicrous glory sometimes, and continuing them on into a very high fidelity, made in 2020 kind of game that I absolutely love and adore.
If you were to tell me they were going to take the floating plant creatures and turn them into like these brilliant like Shinra like spy cam / like laser shooting like enemy types, I would be like, oh, that's super cool. But then they do so much with that, where there's like a side mission where those things show up, and they have like, and they're like, this is what sets them apart from the other drones, and it's like, you didn't have to do that, but they did that. They went there for us.
Yeah. I like the one of the enemies that you would have encountered in the like the little kids hideout kind of section, right? I think is like, I remember in the original game, it just looks like a whole bunch of like piping pieces like thrown together, and it still looks like that, but like it still feels like it. I mean, you're fighting those things in a junk pile, and so it seems like some scrapper threw them together, or like,
or they're like possessed by the black smoke that's in, like the black smoke is actually the creature inside. This is like the shell that it takes on, is what I kind of
or the I mean, I like even that, like I love that I can think of it as like, oh, like the Shinra folk that are working down in the slums are still having to like defend the slums and stuff, and they're just working with what they got, so they built these like
cool
robotic mechs or something like that down there without the resources of like the topsiders and stuff. So yeah, like I love elements like that, and it just like I'm continually blown away by how they incorporate, because they make a point of like taking some of the most obscure and random designs, but still trying to make them feel real in this world. One of the iconic elements that you haven't gotten to yet, but like the train graveyard, they kind of set it up where it's like, yeah, we think there are ghosts there. They're like the train graveyard is haunted and stuff. And seeing how they decide to flesh that out in this world, also, it was just like that turns another section of just kind of like what could have been a forgettable kind of pass-through sequence into like something real and memorable for me.
It's like the train tunnels and then the underplate. Like the idea of the train tunnels and the underplate originally being like maybe 2 or 3 screens a piece, being turned into these like massive area dungeons that you have to like go through, is just such a brilliant way of like reinterpreting the game.
Yeah. Or like the scaffolding section that you're going through.
The underplate, the scaffolding section, with the fans and everything, and like, oh, of course they don't, like, Shinra's not actually sending people down there to actually inspect it, because this place is filled to the brim with monsters. There's not enough power to power everything down there, so you have to like rearrange stuff, and it's so good. But there also brings up like a big question of like, what are we doing? Like, we're doing this, right? Like, and it really ties into, because the reality is this: you are Cloud is a mercenary who has been hired by the eco-terrorist organization that his childhood friend is associated with, and he's doing these this is very much like gray and black. These people are not like living in shades of white. The only reason they do this is because their enemy is just so much more powerful and so much more like corrupt and dangerous that they feel like they have to, and that brings into that moral question. And Barrett Barrett and Jesse and a lot of them talk about it in this game, and it's great because it's not a matter of like, we're blowing up evil corporations. Like, these are real ramifications that we have to deal with as part of like our development as we continue to be successful in these bombing missions.
Yeah, even that I really want to just as another story moment to go back and touch on, and it's mild spoilery, but it was in the demo, so I'm going to go ahead and touch on it. Like, I love the idea that the avalanche bomb goes off and it does almost nothing.
Well, it destroys like the reactor panel.
Yeah,
but it doesn't.
But Shinra goes through and destroys the reactor in a play to basically make Avalanche a bigger scapegoat than it really is. Like, Shinra is building up Avalanche because Shinra doesn't have Wutai as an enemy anymore, so like it is that like xenophobic kind of like mentality that, and I just love how that like that idea gets introduced, and then they play with that throughout kind of the game, versus like this ragtag band of people really being able to, you know, destroy the Death Star in one go or something like that. Like when you think about like the original game, it's like, wow, yeah, Jessie must have been like a great bomb maker. And I love that instead they explore the idea of like, she made a great bomb and it did what it needed to do, but even they were surprised by the amount of destruction that happened.
And she was horrified by it. Like, that's a great part of Jessie's development as a character, is her reaction to what she believes is a more powerful bomb than she intended, and the ramifications of that. And that kind of is like, this is their first time that these ragtag cell of eco-terrorists have actually done something of like significance outside of like some minor raiding, and like have actually done something to really qualify them as like terrorists, because they literally are trying to inspire like terror in the people of Midgar to basically stop supporting Shinra. And Shinra, in trying to push and pressure Shinra to be morally responsible and like turn off the reactors. And it's like, it's a big ask to ask that of Shinra, and Shinra's not going to do it. And it's like, okay, well then, in Barrett's mind, it's like, okay, then we have to keep going. And it's like everybody else's kind of like reaction to that. Like, it's so interesting, the dynamic of the original like this core Avalanche cell that you play through in the original game, and play with these characters as being like these characters who really they are all bleeding hearts. Like, they all care about the planet and they care about people. And this is like the things they're doing to take action aren't just affecting the city and the people who live there, but also themselves and how it reacts to that. And the depth to go into kind of like that deep, seedy, moral gray, almost black mentality of like being the guerrilla fighter, being the terrorist, being the freedom fighter. Ooh, like what is the question of all of that being tied into itself? And like Shinra's bad for sure, but like the question it needs to be asked: is Avalanche really doing good by blowing up the reactors or stopping Shinra in this way? And then that gets brought up even further in the game, and it's great. It's great.
Yeah, and like President Shinra, absolutely bad, but is the Shinra middle manager who they run into on the subway, you know, is he really a bad guy?
And it's important to note, you know, he's not somebody who lives up on the plates. He lives in the slums.
Yeah. the dynamics that they get to explore, because they have a wider canvas for the story that they're telling, I think is great. And in that same vein, I think you touched on it a little bit, but I love how Tifa struggles with this, and how she isn't, like, she doesn't want to be out there killing people, and that's why she wasn't on the bombing mission that opens the game and all that kind of stuff, and she is very reticent to it because she's not as militant as Barrett is, but she she gets dragged into it anyway. But there's a struggle there now that wasn't explored in kind of the original game. But yeah, graphically, like one of the things, it didn't even really dawn on me until like I'm thinking about it now. But I'm like, this game doesn't have a ton in the way of like CGI cinematic stuff that Final Fantasies have had in the past.
No.
Like, so much of it is being done in engine, and the fact that like I'm only now realizing that as we're having this conversation, that like really only that opening thing is like that, the kind of like the opening cinematic. Everything else, I think, really has been like, oh, it's just in engine, and even that opening cinematic could be in engine. I don't know. I feel like no, because they definitely die. Well, they come too far out into the world to have like rendered all of that stuff. But yeah, like the just like the beautiful nature of this game, that every cutscene looks above and beyond what even Final Fantasy 12 or 14 or 12, 13, 15 like CGI cinematics looked like, is just like, that's just the normal game. That's just normal cutscenes in here. I love. So again, shout out to the design there.
The game's incredibly designed, immaculately designed this time around.
Yeah, and I
love textures
of
doors notwithstanding.
Even like it's something I was thinking about today as I was playing through. Like, I love that. Just the fluidity of combat ends, and you get like the little bars that pop up on the side that'll say like, oh, so and so got this much XP, so and so leveled up, all that stuff. Like, the fact that that's just happening as you continue moving through the world instead of going to a battle screen, collecting everything, and then moving on. Like it just adds to the flow of the game. So,
oh my gosh, yeah.
Shout out to how effectively that and the UI is implemented as well. There's sometimes where I'm like, I wish I didn't see what popped up there. I didn't read the thing, so I don't know what I got. And there was a point where I was like, oh, I've got a new weapon that I must have missed because I bought it. I got it from an enemy or something after beating them, and I didn't realize it because I
you
looked
wish there
away
was
from
like a
the
summary
screen or
screen
something
that you could like opt into.
Yeah, sometimes I wish I could go back through and see something like that. But for the most part, it's like I love that like battle ends and I'm just moving on into the next part of the world. So it's a small thing, but like it's something that like just keeps the flow of the game feeling good and the combat feeling good, that you can just kind of go from battle to battle to battle, and not have to struggle with any of that kind of stuff. The last thing I want to touch on is the sound design, because Final Fantasy VII, the original, of course, has one of the most iconic video game soundtracks of all time, I would say.
It ranks up there with
so
the
many
pantheon that other Final Fantasy games, top tier Final Fantasy games, definitely have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love and I've seen like a ton of people share this thought, so I'm not like new. This isn't groundbreaking, but yeah, like it's going to be hard to come up with a better soundtrack for like end of the year awards consideration than this game. And that's admittedly flavored a little bit by my deep love of the original stuff, but so I can't think about how it feels or how it would sound coming into it as somebody fresh. But even that, I love how the themes and stuff are remixed into the game in general, but then also you have like the collectible discs that you can get throughout the game that have like weird little jazzy mixes of like some of these iconic themes and songs and stuff like that. The hip hop chocobo, exactly.
So good.
Like that is one of the first ones you get in Sector 7, and it's like the chocobo theme is something that gets like a new flavor treatment every Final Fantasy these days. So like when the guy's like handing me a mixtape, literally handing you a mixtape of the Chocobo.
Because it says he's like, yeah,
theme.
I made this, I did this, I took the original song. This is like my remix of it. Here, take a copy. It's my mixtape.
Yeah.
It's like,
and you can take those and you can like play them at jukeboxes around the game, or you'll just hear them, you know, in ambient when you're like walking by that area of like where you collect the
and
thing.
I love it because it shows you, it tells you whether or not you have it yet. Because if you don't have it, it comes up in the top left and like
as like
question marks, like 3 question marks, and then when you go to it and you buy it, it's there. And then when you walk through again and you hear it, it shows the title of the song. I love that the first 2 songs you pick up, the first one is a jazz-inspired version of the Prelude. Mm-hmm. And then the second one you get is the Chocobo theme, done remixed hip-hop style. And it is so... and they're like, oh yeah, and then you can listen to both of them on the jukebox. And my favorite thing was, I had the hip-hop song on during that period of time, and like, when Cloud is like drinking at the bar and like Tifa's making him drinks, like the hip hop song is going on in the background. And I'm like, this is it. Like this is perfection.
Yeah, I was playing darts to that.
Oh heck yeah.
Yeah.
If I go back to Seventh Heaven, that song is still on.
Yeah. I love just how they reimagine a lot of that music, but then also just like make it. I mean, it's like all fully orchestral this time around and all that stuff. And so, like, it's as somebody who has like 6 Distant World CDs full of Final Fantasy music, I think, and hopefully we'll still be able to get to go see the Distant World concert here. I have not looked to see if that's been canceled or anything.
If it is, don't tell me.
Here
I can't bear
in
that
September.
heartbreak.
Yeah, but like just. Every song that is playing is just like beautiful and like I'm constantly surprised when I'm like walking through like transitional areas or something, just like I'll hear something and I'll be like, oh, so they've got that song as a bass line and they've like built upon it. I love that. And they even bring in, you know, themes that you wouldn't normally get within the context of Midgar, which I appreciate. Like, I picked up a Cosmo Canyon song somewhere along the line.
I picked up Kate Sith's theme.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, I love that. Like, there's still, like, there is still a ton of music that you will be able to build on in future games. But I love that they're giving you a taste of, hey, here are some of the iconic themes that you know and love, and here's, you know, a 2020 approach to them. And yeah, it's phenomenal. Like the only time I have 2 minor gripes. One of them is that the way the sound is mixed naturally, the music almost always overwhelms dialogue.
Yeah.
So I actually had to go into settings and basically turn like sound effects and music to like an 8 while I kept dialogue at a 10, just so like stuff wasn't getting drowned out.
Yeah.
So that's like one minor thing. And then the other one is the only time I've turned music off is in some of the like timing mini games where the music isn't playing it all in time with
gotcha.
like the things you need to do. So I'm like, it's just distracting me and it's messing me up. So I've muted my TV to go do those timing things, and then I'll like turn the music back on. That is the only. Those are my only 2 like, and again, very minor gripes about any of the music stuff. But everything else, I'm just like, I go to a new area, I'm like, what? I'm excited to see this area that I know from the original game, and I'm excited to hear what the new approach is to it. And it's been a delight all the way through. Anything to add? Any favorites from you, Cam?
I have to say that so far, it's just been an absolute. So I saw somebody put out on Twitter that a specific soundtrack song that's a very classic one, is a very big fan favorite one, was not in the game. And I actually was surprised because I heard it in the game earlier before I read that tweet. And then when playing through, I ended up facing another character who's associated with a particular organization that has a very distinct theme song. And the beginning notes of that song, the very iconic beginning notes of that song, are part of the ambient, like, battle music and, like, introduction and battle music that you end up... not the battle music, sorry, the introductory music part of the soundtrack, like the natural ambient soundtrack to the game while dialogue is going on. Like, that's there. And I'm like, huh, because like you said, it takes the original song, uses it as a bass line, and then takes it off from there. And so I'm like, I can understand that people were upset that the original song wasn't like fully in here, but I'm okay with that because it's still, these boss fights are still super freaking cool, and there's so many of them, and I'm loving all of them. Like, I've yet to face off against a boss that I didn't absolutely adore the way that it's worked.
Mm-hmm. How have you? This goes back to combat, I guess, a little bit, but how have you felt the difficulty of the game is? And you're significantly over grinding, so you're probably feeling way less of a pain point than I do at times. But for me, like speaking, like there have been a couple times where like I'll be in a crazy encounter with a boss fight that'll go like 15 minutes, and then I'll die like right at the finish line. I'm like, God damn it, and I'll have to like restart. But then like I'll incorporate the things I learned, at minute 7 or 8 of the fight from the gate, and the second time through goes much smoother, and I have much less of a problem. And I think I'm in a similar camp to our friend Blessing. I think talked about this on the Kind of Funny review, where like I don't think I've had to go through a fight more than twice. I think I fight something the first time and I learn from it, and then the second time I'm able to take what I learned, or I'm able to like restructure material or whatever to realize like, oh, it'll be really helpful if I have like all 3 of my characters have a lightning spell instead of only one of them or none of them this time around. But like I've encountered that even on just like random encounters or random normal enemy encounters. I've dealt with that a few times where I'm just like, these guys shouldn't be giving me this hard of a time, but like I had an encounter where like somebody was like, I had 2 characters, and like one of the enemies was putting me to sleep, and then the other enemy would like attack, and then the first enemy would put me to sleep, and then like, and it was just like I couldn't escape that cycle. I couldn't escape them putting me to sleep and then like attacking me, and so ultimately I was just like, well, I'm like I don't want to waste all of like my potions to heal myself back up or whatever, so I'm just gonna go ahead and like restart this fight and bring in like something that'll prevent sleep for the next time around. But yeah, like that's been my my experience so far with like the normal difficulty. I've heard like terrible things about the hardcore difficulty mode, so I'm just like, I don't really know if I'm gonna. That's another reason I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna go for the platinum on this one, because I think in hard mode you can't use items at all, and I'm like, that's not fun. That's part of the game. Why would you take that away from me? But I also haven't. You don't get that until you've beaten the game, so I've not experienced that firsthand yet.
Yeah, no, I don't know. So when it comes to like difficulty I've had in the game, very little. There are moments where I realize I've gotten way too ham and I'm not paying attention enough to my health because the screen goes red and it's like, oh, okay, I gotta pay more attention.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and like get put back into operator mode, switch over to Aerith. Let's go ahead and heal real quick, folks. But for real, it's a real thing for that. But I will say that as far as difficulty goes, like as far as like tough fights, no. But there have been moments where like I felt have been a little unforgiving, which is fair. Mm-hmm. Which I think is just part of it. Like, because I've messed up and it's been very unforgiving of me messing up at certain parts. The hover boss, I'm thinking is in particular is one. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I will say, I do enjoy the game though. So at the end of the day, that's what matters.
Oh yeah, that's like I'll curse out an enemy a couple times when like they I feel like they get like cheap attacks on me or something, or if they had attacked anybody else I would have been fine, but they attacked the person I was trying to heal and they killed that person, and so I'm like, I wasted a cure spell because it had already and so I'm like, fuck you. Yeah. And I'll grunt at the game for that kind of stuff, but then I move on and there are a couple. There's like an optional fight right now. I have tried a couple times and first time I got like my lunch handed to me. I came back to it later, did better, but I still like lost, and I was like, all right, I think I need to just grind to be able to take this thing out. And so we'll see if I end up trying to do that before going into like my end game run. or not. But yeah, I'm loving the game. It is a ton of fun. I'm looking forward to finishing it and then kind of like exploring any of the other like cleanup things I want to do, or go back and revisit chapters and do, make some of the different choices that you can make, and seeing how some of that stuff plays out. So yeah, that's like phenomenal game. I'm very much it's probably at the top of my game of the year list so far. And I mean, we've had a good start to the year, so
I definitely would say so.
But yeah, it's I'm loving it. Loving like every little element of it. So, yay for Final Fantasy VII Remake. Any final thoughts from you? As we've already gone like 2 hours on this.
Oh gosh, yeah, it has been, hasn't it?
Yeah.
My final thoughts are this: if you have never played the game before, and it's just like, hey, I don't want to leap into a 60+ hour polygonal PS1 era RPG, play this game. If you played the original and you're like, I don't know how I feel about changes they might have made, play this game. If you've never heard the words Final Fantasy or the number 7, or even the word or concept of the idea of remaking something, play this game. This game is damn good. It is. I've yet to get to the end of it, so I'll have a final appreciation of it at some point soon. But where I'm at with it right now is that 100% this is a game that is worth enjoying and experiencing. And even if you don't love it, even if you have like problems with it, I think that you're not wrong to feel that way. And because of course this, it's art, it's objective, or subjective, I should say. And there's no objective opinion that yes, Final Fantasy VII is a perfect game. But I will say, despite my very small issues with it that I've had so far, I'm very much looking forward to spending much more time with this game. I'm hoping to really just enjoy every moment of it going forward, as much as I have previously in the past 14 hours that I put into this game. I'm really stoked. I'm really stoked to see what more there is, what changes they've made, what they've elaborated on more of, and I will my final point is this: this is a good game. You should play it. There we go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lots of good stuff in there. And I think I've seen people that I've seen Andrea Renee, who does not have any kind of love for Final Fantasy, but she's fallen head over heels for this game. And so that's really cool for me to see as somebody who appreciates her kind of input into the conversation, and seeing her really enjoy what this game is doing. And I think the combat alone is such a new, innovative approach to combat, where it is a wonderful hybrid of action and turn-based activity. So yeah, I can't speak its praises enough. And it is making me love the original game even more, because it's giving me a sense of moments that didn't translate well in my mind. I'm getting to see them in this new version, and immediately think back to the parallel moments from the original game and think, oh, that's what they were going for there. I never would have picked up on that. So I appreciate that the game isn't as restricted anymore and can go bigger and be bolder and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, shout out to Final Fantasy VII Remake. And that's going to do it for this episode. I'm sure we will, as after Cameron and I have defeated this game and beaten it, I'm sure we will reconnect for a spoiler cast, to talk about some of the things we tiptoed around in this, as well as just some of the different decisions they make for the story that I'm very excited to talk to anybody about, really. So yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for joining me, Cameron. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to shout out, Cameron?
Finally, after the nightmare month that was March and beginning of April, the last of my PAX pieces have been put out. Go check them out. It includes the first time I've ever written something like this. I called it a testimonial rather than a review or preview. There is a very particular feelings that I have. There are particular feelings that I have about a game called Welcome to Elk that are, maybe not the written in the best way, but it's definitely written in the most raw and emotional way that I've ever been able to write before. Outside of teen angst I had when I was a teenager, and which was far less cohesive and readable. But I will say that this is in particular a piece that I don't know if I would say I'm necessarily proud of, but it's definitely a piece that I'm glad that I wrote, and I experimented with my writing that way. And then I have another piece about the really cool stuff I saw at Shovel Knight.
Yeah. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey on Twitter. I put up last week a review of Creature in the Well, which is a game I had really loved last year at the but it was before we had that nerdy site, so I hadn't written a proper review of it, and I played it. I'd 100%ed it on Switch, and then on my Xbox One while I was waiting for Gears 5 to download, I think, and it just came to PlayStation a little while back. So I sat down. I talked about it on one of the prior episodes of this show a little bit. Good game. Really enjoyed it. I have the second platinum in the world on it, I think. I was gonna try and get the first, but because I knew how to 100% that game, but somebody in Japan or something got the code 2 days before I did, so he beat me, and I was like, curses. But yeah, real good game. Check it out if you have not already. It is out on PlayStation now, and it's part of Game Pass. I think it's still part of Game Pass, and it's on the Switch. So check that out. I also beat Doom Eternal, so I might get a review of that up in the next week or so, and then. As soon as I finish Final Fantasy VII, I'll be working on the review for that one, for that nerdy site. So check out all that stuff. Also check out Cameron and I will be back tomorrow for that D Plus show, talking about the latest Pixar movie, Onward, that got a brief theatrical release, and then all the COVID-19 stuff happened, and they had to. They ended up putting it on Disney Plus early, so we will be back to talk about that on this week's show. So check out that episode when it goes live tomorrow if you're listening to this the day this show goes live. You can follow all of us, and as well as all the other podcasts and stuff we do, over at That Nerdy Site. Check out thatnerdysite.com for all of the latest. If you liked what you heard, please rate, review, subscribe, maybe even consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Every patron gets early access to a monthly bonus episode of this show, which for this month is Cameron and I talking about how we're dealing with all the pandemic and self-isolation and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that episode goes places.
Yeah. So you can check that out if you are a Patreon supporter at the $1 or above tier. And yeah, as always, thank you for listening. Thank you, Cameron, again for joining me to talk about and gush about Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's a ton of fun getting to talk to anybody about it, really, as I've just been basically playing it nonstop for the last few days. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.